I built my late wife's rose garden back one more time, and my daughter-in-law called it an eyesore in front of my grandchildren. The morning had started like a gift. That's the only way I can describe it, a gift I didn't know I still had the right to receive." End quote. 63 years old, and I was on my knees in the dirt behind my son's house, my hands black with soil, and for the first time in almost 3 years, I wasn't thinking about the empty side of my bed. I was thinking about Margaret, about the way she used to hum old church hymns while she worked, off-key and completely unashamed of it, a trowel in one hand and a cup of lukewarm coffee balanced on the porch rail. She had a rose garden behind our old house for 31 years. English roses, the kind with too many petals to count, the kind that smelled like something you wanted to bottle and keep forever. When we sold the house after she passed because I couldn't stand walking past that window every morning and seeing it empty, I dug up 6 of her rose bushes myself, wrapped the roots in wet burlap, and kept them alive in pots on my back patio for 2 years, waiting for a reason. My grandchildren gave me the reason. Lily, who is 8, and Caleb, who just turned 6, had been begging me all spring to help them make something for their mother's birthday. Not buy something. Make something. Real love isn't wrapped in cellophane, Margaret used to say, and I suppose some part of her wisdom had trickled down into those two without either of them ever meeting her. So I told my son Daniel about the roses. I told him I wanted to plant a garden for his wife, Christine, along the back fence line of their yard, where the morning sun hits just right. Daniel's face did something I hadn't seen in a long time. It softened, the way it used to when he was a boy and I'd take him fishing. He hugged me right there in his kitchen and said, "Dad, she is going to love this. She's going to absolutely love this." So for 3 weekends running, I drove the 40 minutes from my house to theirs with those 6 rose bushes wrapped in the bed of my truck like passengers, like they were coming home from somewhere. Lily and Caleb met me at the fence every single time with garden gloves too big for their hands, and I taught them what I remembered: how deep to dig the hole, how to loosen the roots before you set the plant down, how to water it in slow so the soil settles around the roots instead of washing them bare. Caleb named one of the bushes Big Red because it hadn't bloomed yet, and he was convinced, with the total confidence only a 6-year-old can have, that it was going to be the biggest rose in the whole state of Ohio. Lily wrote her mother a card in crayon that said, "Happy birthday, Mom, we grew you something," and she folded it so many times trying to make it perfect that the crease nearly tore through. I want to tell you, the garden was beautiful before it ever bloomed, and I mean that. There's a kind of beauty in a thing that's freshly planted, still raw at the edges, still full of everything it hasn't become yet. The soil was dark and turned. The little wooden stakes Caleb had painted with each rose's name. Big Red, Sunshine, Margaret's Girl. That's what I called the 4th one, and nobody asked why. They just let me have it, stood crooked and proud along the fence. It looked, to my eyes anyway, like hope planted in rose. Christine's birthday dinner was that Saturday evening. I got there early to help set up, the way I always did, folding napkins and carrying chairs out to the patio while my son grilled and the smell of charcoal drifted over that new little garden like it was blessing it. Lily and Caleb could barely sit still through dinner. Every few minutes one of them would lean over and whisper, "Can we show her now, Grandpa? Can we show her now?" And I kept telling them to wait. "Let your mother enjoy her cake first. We'll walk her back there together as a surprise." When the moment finally came, I felt something in my chest I hadn't felt in years, a kind of nervous joy, the same feeling I used to get walking Margaret out to see something I'd built for her. Daniel took Christine's hand. The kids ran ahead, practically vibrating. I walked slower, hanging back a little, wanting to watch her face when she saw it, wanting to see that same softness cross her features that had crossed Daniel's in the kitchen weeks before. We turned the corner of the house, and there it was, the little rose garden along the fence, catching the last gold light of the evening. Christine stopped walking. For a second I thought it was the good kind of stopped, the kind where the sight of something takes your breath before your words can catch up. But then I saw her jaw tighten, and her eyes moved from the garden to me, and something in her expression I had never seen directed at me before, something cold and sharp, settled into place. "What is this?" she said. Her voice wasn't loud yet. It was worse than loud. It was flat. Daniel started to explain, his voice bright and eager, still not understanding what was happening in front of him. "Dad and the kids planted you a rose garden, babe. It's from Mom's old. I don't want dead woman's roses dug up in my backyard," Christine said. cutting him off, and her voice was climbing now, sharp enough that I saw Lily flinch beside me. This is supposed to be my birthday, my yard. And you fill it with some, she gestured at the fence line, at the little painted stakes, at 3 weekends of my grandchildren's small determined hands, some dying old garden nobody asked for. It looks like a funeral plot. It's an eyesore. Get it out of my yard. I want you to understand something. I have been humiliated before in my life. I have failed at things. I have said the wrong thing at the wrong time, more times than I can count. But I have never, not once in 63 years, felt the specific kind of shame that comes from watching your grandchildren's faces fall in real time, watching 2 children who worked so hard to make something beautiful realize, all at once, that their gift had just been called garbage in front of everyone they loved. Caleb's bottom lip started trembling. Lily's hand, still holding that carefully folded card, dropped to her side like the paper had suddenly gone too heavy to hold up. I stood there. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? I had brought a dead woman's memory into a living woman's backyard, and maybe, in some way I hadn't let myself consider, I understood even through the shock, even through the sting of it, that there might be some truth buried somewhere in her cruelty, even if the delivery of it was a knife. My son's face had gone white. My daughter-in-law's mother, Rosalind, was standing just off to the side near the patio door, and I caught her expression before she smoothed it over the faintest, smallest curl at the corner of her mouth. Not shock, not embarrassment on her daughter's behalf. Something closer to satisfaction. "Christine," Daniel said, his voice low, careful, the way you talk to someone standing too close to a ledge. That's not okay. The kids worked on this for weeks. Dad worked on this for weeks. I don't care how long it took, Christine snapped. I care that nobody asked me. This is my home too, Daniel, or did you forget that when you let your father dig up his dead wife's garden and plant it in my backyard without a single word to me first? The word dead sat in the air like something spilled that couldn't be cleaned up. I watched my son's hands curl into fists at his sides, and for one terrible second I thought he might match her volume, might turn this into the kind of fight that children remember for the rest of their lives. But he didn't raise his voice. He didn't move toward her. He turned, instead, and looked at his children. "Lily, Caleb," he said gently, "why don't you 2 head inside and get some of that cake Grandpa helped make? I'll be right there." Caleb didn't move at first. He was looking at the garden, at Big Red, at the crooked painted stake with his own handwriting on it, and something in his small face had gone somewhere far away. Lily took his hand and led him toward the house without a word, and I watched that folded card slip from her fingers onto the patio steps as they went, forgotten or maybe left there on purpose. I couldn't tell which, and it broke my heart either way. Then Daniel turned back to his wife, and his voice, when it came, was quiet in a way I had never heard from him before. Not calm exactly, controlled, like a man holding something very heavy very carefully so it wouldn't shatter. "You are not going to speak about my mother that way in front of my children ever again," he said. "And you are not going to speak to my father that way in this house, or any house, ever again." Christine's face flushed. "Excuse me? This is my birthday, Daniel, and you're taking his side? Over me?" "I'm not taking a side," Daniel said. "I'm telling you what's true. My father spent 3 weekends of his life, at 63 years old, on his knees in dirt so that our children could give you something made with their own hands. And you called it an eyesore in front of them. There is no version of this where I don't say something." I watched Rosalind step forward then, that same small, satisfied curl still tucked at the edge of her mouth, though she was trying to look concerned now, trying to look like a peacemaker. "Daniel, sweetheart, maybe everyone's just tired. Why don't we?" "Rosalind," Daniel said, not even looking at her, "I think it's time you and Christine's father head home for the night." The silence that followed felt like something physical, like the air itself had gone still and was waiting to see what would happen next. Christine's mouth opened and closed. "I want you to know I did nothing in that moment." I stood frozen at the edge of my son's kitchen light, an old man in dirty gardening jeans, watching his family come apart over a gift he had made with too much love and not enough asking. Part of me wanted to say something, to smooth it over, to tell them all it was fine, don't worry about me, let's just enjoy the cake, but another part of me, a part I recognized, a part that felt like Margaret's voice in my ear, told me to stay quiet and let my son handle what needed to be handled. "Fine, Christine said finally, her voice shaking with something between fury and humiliation of her own now. Fine. I'll leave, since apparently my own house isn't my own house anymore. She didn't leave the house, but she left the yard, storming past all of us, past the little rose garden that had started this whole thing, and the sound of the sliding glass door slamming behind her seemed to hang in the yard long after the noise itself had faded. Rosalind gave me one last look, not apologetic, nothing close to it, before she followed her daughter inside, murmuring something I couldn't hear and didn't want to. Daniel stood beside me in the half-dark, both of us looking at the garden. The roses hadn't even bloomed yet. They wouldn't for another few weeks. We'd planted hope, and hope had been called garbage before it ever had the chance to become anything. "I'm sorry, Dad," Daniel said quietly. "Don't apologize for me," I told him. "I should have asked her first. That was my mistake. I got so caught up in wanting to give her something beautiful that I didn't stop to think whether she wanted it." Daniel shook his head. "That's not the mistake, Dad. The mistake was how she reacted to it. Those are different things." 18.5. We went inside. The birthday cake sat half-cut on the counter, and Lily and Caleb were sitting at the kitchen table in silence, not eating, just sitting with their hands in their laps like they were waiting to be told the party was over. I sat down between them, and I did the only thing I knew how to do in that moment. I told them the truth, gently, the way Margaret always told me the truth was better delivered. "Your mom is having some big feelings tonight," I said. "Sometimes grown-ups say things in anger that they don't fully mean, or that come out a lot harsher than they intended. That garden you two built isn't garbage. It isn't an eyesore. It's one of the most beautiful things anyone has ever made for me to help build, and I am so proud of both of you." Caleb looked up at me, his eyes still wet. "Is Big Red gonna get thrown away?" "No, buddy," I said, my throat tight. "Big Red isn't going anywhere. I want to tell you the rest of that night was easy, but it wasn't." The cake got eaten in near silence. Daniel drove me home himself instead of letting me take my truck, saying he wanted the fresh air, though I think really he wanted the 20 extra minutes to sit with what had happened before he had to go back inside and face his wife. He didn't say much on the drive. Neither did I. Some things don't need words yet. Some things just need time to settle, the way soil needs time to settle around a newly planted root before you can trust it'll hold. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt loud. Daniel called me every evening, mostly just to check in, mostly saying things were tense but manageable. I didn't ask too many questions. I had learned a long time ago, back when Daniel was a teenager and I'd made my share of mistakes as a father, that sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for your child is let them handle their own house without you hovering over the wound. It was 9 days later when Christine showed up at my door. I almost didn't recognize her at first, not because her face had changed, but because everything else about her had. She was standing on my front porch in the late afternoon light wearing an old flannel shirt I later learned had been her father's, her hair pulled back plainly, no makeup, holding something wrapped in a dish towel against her chest like she was afraid to let it go. "Mr. Bennett," she said. "That's my name, Walter Bennett. Though most people just call me Walt. Can I come in? I need to talk to you. I want to be honest." I hesitated. 9 days is not very long to forgive a wound like that one. But Margaret raised me better than to leave a person standing on the porch when they've clearly come to say something hard, so I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit down right away. She stood in my living room, looking at the old photographs on my mantel. Margaret at 25. Margaret at 50. Margaret in the garden that had started all of this, and when she finally turned to face me, her eyes were already filling. "I brought you something," she said, and unwrapped the dish towel to reveal a small, clumsily potted rose bush, its leaves a little wilted from the car ride, one small bud just beginning to open at the top. "I bought it 3 days ago. I've been trying to figure out how to bring it to you ever since." I didn't say anything. I let her keep going. "Guy, I didn't. I need to tell you why I reacted the way I did," she said, her voice shaking, "and it's not a good reason, Mr. Bennett, but it's the true one, and I owe you the true one. My mother Rosalind, she's been in my ear for 2 years about your relationship with Daniel, telling me it's not normal for a grown man to be that close to his father. Telling me that every time you come around, it's a reminder that I'll never be the most important person in his life, that his family will always come before mine." She's the one who first said the word eyesore to me, weeks before your birthday when I mentioned you and the kids were planning something for the yard. She planted it in me. I didn't even realize until I was standing there looking at those roses that the words coming out of my mouth weren't fully my own. They were hers. I just borrowed her cruelty and used it on the kindest thing anyone has done for me in years. I sat down slowly in my armchair, the one across from the couch where Margaret used to do her crossword puzzles in the evenings, and I let Christine keep talking, because it was clear she had been carrying this for 9 days and needed somewhere to set it down. She has never liked that Daniel and I are close to you, Christine went on. She lost her own husband young, and I think somewhere in her grief she decided that if she couldn't have a full family, none of us should get to have one either. She's been telling me for years that you and Daniel would eventually try to push me and the kids out, that I needed to build a wall around our house, our money, our decisions, so that your side of the family couldn't get too much influence. I let her build that wall in my head for so long that I didn't even notice I'd been living inside it. And then you and Lily and Caleb built me a garden with your bare hands. And instead of seeing love, I saw a threat. Because that's what she trained me to see. I told her, quietly, that I forgave her. I meant it, though. I'll admit forgiveness and forgetting are two very different animals. And I wasn't sure yet which one I was fully capable of. But I have lived long enough to know that people are rarely only the worst 5 minutes we've witnessed of them, and the woman sitting in my living room, holding a rosebush she'd bought with her own hands and driven across town with, trembling as she confessed her mother's poison, that woman was trying, in the only way she knew how, to become someone better than the person who had stood in that backyard 9 days earlier. There's more, she said, wiping her eyes. My mother has been telling Daniel, behind my back, that we should move further away. Not just across town, she means across the country. She's been telling him it would be good for our marriage, good for the kids, to put distance between us and you, she said, gesturing vaguely toward me, toward this whole side of the family. She's been planning it for months. I only found out because I overheard her on the phone with a realtor 2 states away. I felt something cold settle in my stomach at that. Not surprise, exactly. Something more, like confirmation of a fear I hadn't let myself fully name. Does Daniel know? I asked. Not yet, she said. I wanted to come here first. I wanted to fix what I broke with you before I told him what my mother's really been trying to do. I was so afraid, Mr. Bennett. I was so afraid of losing my place in this family that I let someone convince me the way to protect it was to push everyone else out. And instead I almost lost the thing I was trying to protect. We talked for a long while after that, the light shifting slow and gold through my front windows the way it does in early evening. She told me about her childhood, about a mother who measured love in control, who made every act of independence feel like betrayal. I recognized some of it. Not all of it. My own life had been different. Kinder in some ways, but enough of it that my anger, which had been sitting hard in my chest for 9 days, began to loosen its grip. You don't need her permission to love this family, I told her. You have your own family now. Daniel, the children, and me, if you'll still have me. She cried harder at that than she had the whole conversation, and I understood why. Sometimes the hardest thing to hear isn't a punishment. It's grace you didn't think you'd earned back yet. A week after that, Daniel called and asked if I would come for Sunday dinner. He said it carefully, the way you test the temperature of water before stepping in. I knew what that invitation meant. One, service. I knew what that invitation meant. It meant Christine had told him everything about her mother, about the years of quiet poison, about the plan to move the family away from me. It meant some kind of reckoning had already happened in that house before I ever arrived. When I got there, the tension I'd braced myself for wasn't in the air. Christine met me at the door and hugged me, an honest hug, not a performance for the children's benefit. Lily and Caleb ran to me the way they always had, chattering about school and a lizard Caleb had found in the yard, as if 9 days of silence and shame had simply evaporated in the resilience only children seem to fully possess. We sat down to dinner and it was Daniel who spoke first, his hand finding Christine's on the table. Dad, he said, we've made a decision. Christine's mother is not going to be welcome in our home for a while. Not until some things change, and maybe not ever. If they don't, we're not moving away. We talked about it and we both agree we want to be closer to you, not further. We're actually thinking about looking at houses in your neighborhood. I set my fork down because my hands had gone a little unsteady. It's my idea as much as his, Christine said, her voice firm in a way that reminded me, oddly, of the firmness in her voice the night of the garden, except this time it wasn't cruelty behind it. It was resolve. I don't want my kids growing up the way I did, always managed, always controlled by fear disguised as love. I want them growing up watching their grandfather teach them how to plant roses. I want that to be normal for them. I never want another moment like that night to happen in this family again. Lily, who had been listening more closely than any of us realized, tugged my sleeve. "Grandpa," she said, "is Big Red gonna bloom soon?" "Any day now, sweetheart," I told her, and I meant it in more ways than one. The dinner that followed was easy in a way that felt earned rather than given. We laughed. Caleb told a long, meandering story about the lizard that had no clear ending and didn't need one. Christine asked me questions about Margaret. I hadn't been asked in years what she liked to cook, what songs she used to hum, whether the roses had a favorite season, and answering them didn't hurt the way I thought it might. It felt, instead, like handing Margaret's memory to someone who had finally decided to hold it gently. When I drove home that night, my house didn't feel as quiet as it usually did. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the back patio where 2 empty pots still waited the last 2 rose bushes I hadn't yet found a home for. I thought about calling it a night, but something told me to check the mailbox first, an old habit from decades of waiting on letters that mattered. There was a small padded envelope inside, no return address, and when I opened it at my kitchen table, I found a single photograph. It was the rose garden, taken that same afternoon, golden light slanting across the fence the way it had the night everything fell apart, except now every single bush was in bloom. Big Red truly was enormous, a deep velvet red that would have made Margaret laugh out loud with pride. On the back, in handwriting that was still finding its confidence, was a short note. "They bloomed today. I sat out here and watched them for an hour and thought about how wrong I was. Thank you for teaching my children what love looks like when it's patient. I'm still learning. Christine." I sat at my kitchen table for a long while after that, the photograph in my hands, the house quiet around me the way it had been quiet for 3 years now, except this particular quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the kind of stillness that comes right before something good is about to grow.